The second Brenda Whitfield reached into her oversized leather purse, I honestly thought she was about to pull out another HOA violation slip. She had a habit of showing up unannounced and waving paperwork around like it was a royal decree. But instead of documents, she pulled out a pearl-handled revolver, a relic straight out of some dusty museum. The kind of gun you'd see in an old Western, not at a child's backyard birthday party. The laughter stopped instantly, like someone had pressed mute on the whole gathering. Hot dogs sat half-eaten on paper plates. Drinks slipped from hands, and the air got heavy with panic. My son froze mid-step on the deck, and the kids in the bounce house suddenly fell silent, their little faces pale as they peeked over the inflatable walls to see what was happening. I gripped my iced tea tighter than I should have, forcing myself not to move too quickly, as my eyes locked on the woman standing there with her arm extended and fire in her eyes. "Your property is a disgrace," Brenda barked, her voice shaking with rage as she aimed the revolver toward my barn. "Sell this land or I'll handle it myself." Her tone carried the kind of venom you wouldn't expect at a family barbecue. Parents grabbed their kids, shielding them with their bodies, pulling them away from the deck. My brother-in-law ducked behind the grill, as if a rack of ribs could protect him from bullets. My sister had her phone halfway out of her pocket, her hands trembling as she tried to hit record. Every sound of summer, the buzzing cicadas, the laughter, the smell of burgers, vanished, replaced by the sharp metallic silence of fear. Brenda didn't care. Her lipstick-perfect smile twisted into something cruel as she waved the pistol, like it was her golden ticket to victory. My name is Daniel McCarthy, and in that moment, standing on the deck of Rolling Creek Ranch, I realized how far Brenda had fallen in her obsession. I'm 41, a veteran of 2 tours overseas, and when my father passed 3 years ago, I came back home to take care of the land that's been in my family since 1881. This ranch isn't just dirt and cattle. It's 85 acres of blood, sweat, and heritage. My great-great-grandfather staked his claim here, when this valley was nothing but wild grass and untamed streams. Generations of McCarthys built barns, dug wells, raised cattle, and carved out a life. But lately, my family's legacy had become the target of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, a suburban expansion that crept outward like ivy choking everything in its path. They had shiny sidewalks, identical beige houses, and rules about how long your grass could be. And then somehow they annexed everything around my ranch, leaving me stranded in the middle of their manicured paradise like a relic from another century. At the head of it all was Brenda Whitfield, the 55-year-old HOA president who treated the neighborhood like her own personal kingdom. She wasn't subtle about her disdain for the ranch. To her, my weathered barn was an eyesore, my windmill a nuisance, my cows a threat to property values. She came from a world of Pinterest boards and catered luncheons, a former wedding planner who'd traded bouquets for bylaws. She strutted around in pressed suits and heels, hair lacquered with enough spray to survive a hurricane, and her smile never reached her eyes. When she first knocked on my door, she brought a glossy briefcase, a stack of contracts, and a check with more zeros than I'd ever seen on one line. She called it an opportunity, said I could finally modernize my life by moving into one of their new houses with granite countertops and plastic lawns. I turned her down flat, told her the ranch wasn't for sale at any price, and that's when her smile vanished like a mask ripped away. Her voice dropped to a low, cold whisper, promising me that I'd regret the decision. She called my refusal an obstacle to progress, said this valley was destined for development, and hinted she always got her way. At first I thought it was just an empty threat, but I underestimated how far Brenda was willing to go. Not long after, the citations started arriving in my mailbox. Illegal livestock, unapproved structures, improper fencing. She even tried to classify my cattle as livestock nuisances, which made about as much sense as saying water was too wet. Every morning at sunrise, I'd spot her Lexus creeping past my property, stopping so she could snap photos, jot notes, and shake her head in exaggerated disapproval. She was building a case, stacking papers like ammunition, all in the hopes of forcing me to sign over my family's heritage. And now, standing on my porch with that revolver shaking in her manicured hands, I realized this feud had crossed into dangerous territory, and Brenda wasn't going to walk away quietly this time. The harassment didn't come all at once. It trickled in like a slow leak you almost ignore, until the floorboards warp. First came the official-looking letters slipped into my gate, accusing me of violating HOA standards. According to Brenda, my cattle represented an unsightly agricultural intrusion into what she called a planned residential community. Never mind the fact that Rolling Creek Ranch was zoned agricultural long before her beige houses ever sprouted up. Then came a notice about my windmill, a proud piece of iron that had been spinning since 1897, pumping clean water into troughs for generations. She stamped it as an unauthorized modern installation, as if history itself was breaking some newly invented suburban rule. The absurdity might have been laughable if her persistence hadn't carried such a sharp edge. Each letter dripped with the arrogance of someone convinced the law bent to her clipboard. By midsummer, her presence around my property became impossible to ignore. At exactly 6:30 each morning, her silver Lexus would appear like clockwork. She'd climb out in her pencil skirt and heels, clipboard tucked under her arm, like she was leading a corporate inspection, instead of trespassing across dusty ranch land. I'd watch from the porch as she crouched near hay bales, snapped photos of tractor parts, and scribbled furiously like a detective closing in on a case. Once, I caught her kneeling by the fence line, stretching a tape measure along one of my posts, lips pursed in concentration. When I asked what she was doing, she didn't flinch. She just told me, in that syrupy tone she used when trying to sound civil, that she was checking for compliance. I reminded her this was ranch property, not one of her pristine lawns, but she just smiled that cold smile and drove away like she'd won a small victory. It wasn't long before she shifted gears from petty inspections to outright defamation. Flyers began appearing in mailboxes around the neighborhood, each one stamped with HOA letterhead, claiming that I was preparing to sell the ranch because I was struggling mentally and financially. She described me as a man clinging to rural delusions, too unstable to maintain such a vast piece of land. Some of my neighbors showed me the leaflets in disbelief, shaking their heads while others whispered nervously, afraid that Brenda's lies carried weight. She hosted impromptu meetings in people's living rooms, where she painted my cattle as vectors of disease and my barn as a collapsing hazard. When attendance dwindled, usually, just 2 or 3 curious residents, she doubled down, waving printouts of livestock, ordinances, and warning about contamination. Like she was presenting evidence at a trial. The official complaints soon followed. She called the county health department, insisting the smell of my herd was an environmental violation, though the nearest new home sat half a mile away. She filed reports with animal control, alleging my horses were neglected and starving. When a vet finally showed up, clipboard in hand, he left shaking his head, saying he wished all the animals in the county looked as healthy as mine. Not even embarrassment slowed her down. She wrote to the county zoning board, arguing that my barn was unsafe and should be condemned. What she didn't expect was the preservation committee showing up, cameras flashing, awarding me a plaque for maintaining one of the region's last historic agricultural structures. That plaque now hangs proudly on my barn wall, a quiet symbol of how thoroughly she miscalculated. Her obsession became more personal each time she failed. Every denial seemed to add fuel to the fire burning inside her. She began showing up at my gate, knocking on the wooden beams like she owned the place, offering checks with higher numbers each time. Her voice lost its sugary tone, replaced by veiled threats. "This valley is moving forward," she'd hiss, "and you either move with it, or you'll be crushed by it." She muttered about property values, about influence, about people above my pay grade who backed her vision. She thought intimidation would scare me into folding. But every time I stood firm, telling her Rolling Creek Ranch wasn't for sale, not now, not ever. Her smile would tighten, her jaw would lock, and she'd leave with the promise of seeing me soon. By the time my son's 9th birthday arrived, Brenda had reached a boiling point. We set up the yard with picnic tables, balloons tied to fence posts, a rented bounce house bouncing with squeals of laughter. Family came from out of town. Neighbors brought pies, and for one afternoon, it felt like life was normal again. Kids chased each other through the grass. My sister's laughter carried across the yard, and even I felt the rare comfort of peace. But Brenda had been watching from the shadows of her kingdom, her eyes narrowing as she saw the joy on land she wanted buried under asphalt. Around 2 o'clock, as the grill smoked and my son unwrapped his gifts, the sound of heels clicked up my driveway. She marched straight through the gate, pink suit blazing, oversized purse hanging at her side, ready to make her most dangerous move yet. The revolver swung through the air in Brenda's trembling hand, the pearl handle glinting in the afternoon sun. She wasn't calm or collected like she wanted to appear. Her movements were jerky, desperate, more dangerous because of the lack of control. "Sign over the deed, Daniel," she screeched, her voice shrill enough to cut through the hum of cicadas. "Your ranch is poisoning this community. If you don't hand it over today, I'll make sure the county shuts you down tomorrow." Parents yanked their children behind picnic tables, forming human shields with their own bodies. My sister fumbled with her phone, hands shaking but determined to record every second. My brother-in-law crouched behind the grill, spatula still in his hand like he was preparing for battle. What Brenda didn't realize was that her dramatic stunt had already backfired. My neighbor Jack, a retired sheriff with reflexes still sharp as a whip, had dialed 911 the instant she produced the weapon. His calm voice carried over the phone, describing an armed HOA president threatening families at a child's birthday party. While Brenda ranted about property values and progress, Jack stood near the gate, his hand on his belt as if muscle memory was itching for his old badge. The longer Brenda waved that revolver, the more phones came out, neighbors, friends, even some of the older kids, each one capturing proof that would spread like wildfire. Her shouts became louder, more unhinged, as if volume alone would force me into surrender. The shriek of approaching sirens cut through the chaos, echoing across the valley. For the first time, Brenda's confidence wavered. Her eyes darted toward the gravel road, pupils shrinking as red and blue lights flashed in the distance. She tried to backpedal, lowering the gun slightly, stammering about how she was just making a point. But the phones kept recording, and her earlier threats were now permanent evidence burned into memory cards. When the deputies stepped onto my property, hands on their holsters, Brenda's facade crumbled. She attempted to shove the revolver back into her purse, as though stuffing it away would erase what had just happened. Her words tumbled over themselves, claims of standing her ground, of being threatened by my aggressive livestock, of fulfilling her duty as HOA president. But to everyone watching, she just looked like a cornered bully scrambling for excuses. The deputies weren't buying her story. They ordered her to drop the weapon, voices calm but firm, and when she hesitated, one of them stepped forward with steel in his eyes. Finally, Brenda's arms sagged and the revolver clattered onto the wooden deck, the metallic sound ringing like a final note of humiliation. They cuffed her in front of the children, who peeked wide-eyed from behind the bounce house, their birthday balloons swaying in the breeze as if mocking the absurdity of it all. My sister kept filming, steady now, capturing every second of Brenda's downfall. The deputies searched her purse and discovered not only was the revolver loaded, but it was also unregistered, an heirloom she had no legal right to carry. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they led her to the patrol car, her heels sinking into the soft earth, her shouts about HOA authority growing fainter with each step. The aftermath came quickly, sharper than Brenda probably ever anticipated. The HOA board, scrambling to save face, called an emergency meeting the very next day. I didn't attend, but neighbors filled me in. The room was chaos, papers scattered, voices raised, and Brenda's loyal allies shrinking into their seats as financial records came to light. Tens of thousands of dollars had vanished from the community fund. Italian marble ordered for her private patio, spa retreats labeled as leadership training, even custom signage that advertised her personal real estate business. The board treasurer's voice cracked as he read the numbers aloud, his hands shaking with betrayal. For years she had cloaked herself in authority, hiding behind bylaws and fear tactics. But now the mask was gone. What remained was a trail of theft, intimidation, and lies, finally exposed under the same spotlight she had tried to shine on me. Her trial drew a crowd, the courtroom packed with neighbors, who once tiptoed around her but now sat ready to testify. Witness after witness recounted months of harassment, bogus complaints, false reports, threats delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. The videos from my son's birthday party played on a large screen, the sound of her shrill demands filling the room like a ghost she couldn't escape. The jury members didn't look at her with sympathy. They looked at her like someone who had crossed every line of reason. My son, just 9 years old, bravely took the stand and admitted he had been scared, but then added he mostly felt sorry for Brenda, because she just seemed like someone who needed a timeout. The gallery chuckled. The judge even cracked a smile, and Brenda's face flushed crimson as she buried her head in her hands. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next wild HOA Karen meltdown. And drop a comment below. What would you have done if Brenda showed up with that revolver?